Welcome back to another impactful episode of the PSTA Podcast. This is Craig King, your host, and I have the man of the hour, the decade, Patrick Kelly, with me today. Patrick, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Craig. I just want to thank you for the high-functioning technology that you use on the PSTA Podcast. PSTA members just got that joke. If you didn't get the joke, you should be a PSTA member.
Yep, you should be it. Absolutely, Patrick. So, legislative session started a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, we're 2 weeks down.
2 weeks down. I know you missed us last week on the podcast. Don't worry, we're going to catch you up about what's going on. So, Patrick, what's going on before we really dive into what we're really going to talk about today? What's going on?
There's a lot going on at the General Assembly already. There have been bills that have addressed some classroom-related issues as it relates to gender identity. There is a comprehensive overhaul of the Read to Succeed Act that is getting a lot of review in the Senate. It looks this week like the Senator Young's bill to provide work experience credit to newly certified teachers with prior work experience is going to get its day on the Senate floor. We're excited to see that. And the House of Representatives is getting cranked up with committee hearings, and we're hopeful to see some exciting things coming out of that in coming weeks. So it's been busy, but there's one topic that's just consuming all the oxygen right now.
Yeah, we're going to jump right into that. But thank you for that brief update about all the other issues. But, teachers are very, and you can look at it like this. Teachers are very involved with this topic that we're going to talk about, the proposed teacher salary update or suggestions by Governor McMaster's office that we shared out to our members. And I visited groups of teachers over the past couple of weeks talking to them, and they have questions, and Patrick has been fielding emails and responding to emails all morning. So I'll let him take the floor about, what this proposal is, what it's not, and what teachers, and answer some of the questions that we have heard from teachers.
Yeah, let me start with what it is. It is a proposal. It is not a bill. It's not in the legislature. Now, I don't want to undersell it because Governor McMaster has been highly effective in getting his budgetary proposals passed into the actual state budget. He has a really strong, effective working relationship with the legislature. But people need to understand this is a proposal. This is a starting place, and it is a comprehensive overhaul of teacher compensation in South Carolina that's really in 4 different parts. I just got done responding to an email from a member who asked if I support or oppose the proposal. And I said, well, it's a little bit more nuanced than that because there are parts of this plan that I love. There are parts of this plan that I got some heartburn about. And so it's really important for people to get informed on this one and deep dive and walk through those 4 different areas of proposed changes because it is going to have a discrepant impact on teachers across the state based on where they are on the salary schedule and what district they're in.
Yeah. So any teacher could look at this salary schedule and proposed salary schedule and say, hey, I like this, but then there may be some teachers that say, hey, I don't like this. And what we want our members to know is that we are presenting the information for you. We want you to have all the information to make an informed decision. I do want to ask this, Patrick, right now we have a statewide minimum salary schedule that goes up to 23 years. And so this proposed legislation from the governor's perspective would replace the statewide minimum salary schedule?
That's right. This is a comprehensive replacement of the statewide minimum salary schedule, and we're just going to emphasize that word statewide. I think that's just a single word over and over again because, as I emphasized to members in the most recent email, districts can pay beyond the statewide minimum, and the overwhelming majority of districts in South Carolina do. So it's again, this is why it's discrepant impact on different members. If you look at the governor's proposal and then compare it to your current paycheck, you may look at it and go, holy goodness gracious, I'm going to get a $6,000 pay cut even though I'm a master's teacher and I'm not in one of these lanes that are getting collapsed that we'll talk about in a second. But it's because the governor proposes the statewide minimum. And you may be looking at that $5,000 or $6,000 pay cut when you look at his schedule, not because of anything in his proposal, but because your district currently pays $5,000 or $6,000 beyond the statewide minimum. So it's really nuanced to look at, okay, well, where do I fall on the governor's proposal? But also, where does my district currently compare to that statewide minimum? Because while the governor's proposal in the budget does not require districts to maintain their local supplement level from one year to the next, and it hasn't, that's not something Governor McMaster's eliminating, that's just not how it works. He's proposing an additional $250 million to go to districts and state aid to classrooms to cover the changes he's making to the salary schedule, to cover the increase to statewide minimum salary schedules, but also to give districts sufficient funds to help them maintain their existing local supplements. And I cannot, some people have emailed and said, well, I look at this proposal, the governor must not care about recruitment and retention. And typically I try to remain Switzerland and neutral on everything, but I will push back a little bit there. I would argue the opposite. The man is committed to educator recruitment and retention, and you look at the budget. The old adage in politics is, don't tell me what you value, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value. He's proposing $250 million increase in a state budget that is projected to have $750 million in new money. That's a third of all new money going to educator salaries in a state where we know we got some roads and bridges that need some help, and local law enforcement and public health need additional resources. So he's putting his money where his mouth is. Now, can you have a disagreement with him about how you go about allocating that money? Absolutely.
Sure.
But the intent is to enhance recruitment and retention, but whether that applies to an individual educator is going to be driven by what district you're in and where you're at on the existing salary schedule.
Yeah, and that explanation is needed because, I spoke to a group of teachers, and the teacher, she said, well, based on this and where I am, I'm going to take use the number, $6,000 hit. And I said, well, this is the proposed statewide minimum. Your district pays above the statewide minimum. And so that relieved her right there. And so really just having accurate information about the legislation. As Patrick just mentioned, there are parts of this proposal that, as an organization we like, but then there's others that we have heartburn over, as he said. And the process to where this would change is a very meticulous and thought out process. The governor has set his budget, right? Mm-hmm. He does not legislate.
Nope.
He can't say this is my budget and it's going to come to pass. And so I know sometimes when you read certain online articles, or if you read things on social media, you may see the budget, the governor proposed this right here, but he does not legislate. Shout out to my third grade teachers. Shout out to my third grade teachers. We teach that 3 branches.
Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah, we know it.
For the win.
Yep. So that's a big part. The House will have their first crack, and I'm not stealing Patrick's thunder because, well, I am a little bit. The House has their first crack at the budget coming up, and I'll let Patrick share that. And then they'll decide if they want to take on this proposal.
Yeah, and let me emphasize one thing here, because I'm always cognizant of making sure that we don't overstate something. And you and I have both said this is a proposal.
Sure. And
the governor alone cannot get this done. But what I also want people to hear, so take solace in the fact it's a proposal if you have concerns with what's in it. There's a lot of ground to cover before this becomes reality. But I will also offer that if representatives do not hear from teachers, the chances of the proposal becoming law as it was proposed go up exponentially, simply because representatives are responsive to what they hear from constituents. Last Wednesday night, I was in the House chamber until 9 p.m. at night on a bill that has nothing to do with salary, but it did deal with education. And what struck me was, as they were debating an amendment that related to schools, both the representatives speaking in favor of and against the amendment kept referencing, well, I heard from teachers in my district. And it was clear that they were responding to a contact from a constituent. Now, I don't know how many. It might have just been one teacher.
Yeah.
But they were referencing that. And so if teachers have concerns, or if they have things they are over the moon excited about, which I've gotten those emails too, they need to contact their representative, because in a vacuum of constituent feedback, representatives will be less able to craft a budget that is responsive to the voices of educators that are currently working in schools, simply because they only know what they know. And if we're not telling them, we can't expect them to know. So we've got to engage, even though this is just a proposal right now.
Yeah, and the vast majority of our elected officials, 170 of them, the majority of them are not educators. And so they lean to not just PSTA, but more importantly, they lean towards their constituents who are on the ground level, who are in classrooms to yield their expertise. And so we always say this: you are the experts when it comes to the work that you do. And teacher compensation is something, we're in a very great period where we have not only the executive branch, but we also have the legislative branch that are all in sync to do more with teacher salaries. And so we want to maximize on this moment. And again, we're not saying this proposal as written is what should be done, but this is something that we can engage in, we can advocate for and against. You find the components based on our land that you don't necessarily agree with. And when you have phone calls and meetings with your elected officials, you can communicate that.
Yeah, and the one thing I'd stick a pin in this particular conversation on, that you said something that surfaced something in my mind that's really important in terms of what legislators know. We can sometimes put on our education blinders and think that that's the only policy issue out there, and it makes sense. That's what we do. It's our profession. But legislators have to deal with all the other policy areas, and educator salaries, that teacher's salary schedule, is a unique animal in all of state government. No other state employment situation has a salary schedule that has 5 lanes and 23 steps. And so even the best intentioned legislators, they're working on teacher pay raises, but they also have to look at law enforcement officers, and they have to look at state employees, and all of them have different salary setups. So legislators need to hear from the people that are working under a salary schedule to fully appreciate and understand the impact it has. And so that's why, I know some people like to listen to this on their drive in, and hopefully you're not stuck in traffic. So I'd love to make sure we touch on the 4 big things that the governor's proposal does that is different from prior years.
Let's do it.
All right. Thing number 1 is the easiest one that PSTA universally supports, has been on our policy agenda for the last 3 years, which is to raise educator minimum pay in South Carolina by $2,500, which would move it from $42,500 to $45,000 next year, as part of the governor's ongoing push to get minimum teacher pay to at least $50,000 by no later than the year 2026. Would he like to go faster and farther? Yes, he's publicly said that. But again, the $2,500 increase is accounting for 1/3 of increased projected state revenue. If you tried to go to $50,000 this year, the budget literally cannot sustain it unless you cut somewhere else. And again, go drive down a road. We probably can't afford that. So, that's number 1.
Yep.
PSTA strongly supports that. I haven't heard any pushback on that. Number 2 is the creation of career ladder and strategic compensation stipends. This is new, but it's been in the PSTA legislative agenda for 3 years now. It's also in the Teacher Recruitment and Retention Task Force report that came out in 2023. And I'm not going to get too weedy on this because a podcast can't cover this. You need to look at the chart.
That's right.
There is a chart that the task force put out that shows what an envisioned career ladder could look like. And basically what a career ladder means is an opportunity for a teacher who stays in the classroom to get increased compensation for taking on additional leadership tasks within a school building. In effect, what it's seeking to remedy is, right now, the reality is that for most teachers, if you want to experience a meaningful pay increase that doesn't involve another education degree, the only way to do it is to leave the classroom altogether and go into an administrative position. And so the career ladder concept is a way to allow teachers to stay in the classroom with direct contact with students in an instructional role while gaining additional compensation for leadership roles, many of which they already do. It's things like mentoring a new teacher or a student teacher, department chair. Teachers across the state are already doing these things for minimal or no compensation. The governor's saying now we should compensate that at a meaningful level. Similarly, strategic compensation is, as he's envisioning it, is providing a compensation boost for individuals that are working in critical subject areas or critical geographic areas. A simple example was 3 years ago, Hawaii had a massive statewide special education shortage. So they provided a $10,000 stipend to special educators that came to Hawaii, and in 1 year they eliminated their entire special education workforce vacancy rate.
And it's Hawaii.
It's Hawaii, which is appealing, but also let's remember, like, you got to be committed to move to Hawaii.
That's
like
right.
That's more than just like hopping the border to Charlotte.
Yeah.
You're moving at that point.
That's right.
So area 2 that we support, strategic compensation and career ladder stipends. Area number 3, this is where we get more confusing. You mentioned, Craig, the steps. Currently, the statewide minimum salary schedule goes to 23 steps. So you get a step of an additional step for every year of experience through 23 with a corresponding pay increase. Now, some listeners may be thinking, well, wait a second, I'm in year 38 and I just got a step. That's because your district does that. And there are districts that go beyond 23, but there are a lot of districts that stop at 23 because that's all the state requires. What people need to understand is the existing salary schedule, though, even though it awards a step for every year, 0 to 23, not all steps are created equal. Some steps, especially in the middle of the career on the existing salary schedule, can be as much as $800 per year. But some other steps, especially those on the front and back end of the salary schedule, can be as little as $70 per year. Which, let's just be real. Craig, if I told you I'm going to give you a $70 annual pay raise, what's that going to do to the King household?
Maybe another loaf of bread.
That's about it. By the time taxes get taken out, you're getting your 6.2% off the top for Social Security, 1.45 for Medicare, and then state income, federal income.
All of that.
Yeah, a $70 annual pay raise is a raise in name only. It has no practical impact. So what the governor's proposing is to extend salary steps to 30 years, which has been in our legislative agenda for years because the earliest you can retire is 28 in South Carolina and get full retirement. So we think steps should at least extend that far. But to do that, what he's proposing is a banded step where you get a step every 3 years instead of every year. And that 3-year step is a $2,000 step. And there's been some concern with members on that. And look, I get it. When I first looked at that on paper, I was like, I don't know about that. I like my annual step. But here's the trick. Because the existing salary schedule is not consistent in how much each annual step is worth, if you look at an individual over the course of a career, which is the governor's goal, he wants to retain people in the classroom. And if you want to retain them, you got to think big picture, not just a single year. You also got to think over a 30-year career. As we've sent out to members with a graphic showing a bachelor's degree teacher under the current schedule compared to what the governor's schedule has, the banded steps actually bring out that bachelor's degree teacher $26,000 ahead at the end of their career because that $2,000 step every 3 years warps past those individual steps. So like currently, by the time someone would get to step 3 with a bachelor's degree on the governor's schedule, they would be getting paid more in year 3 than an individual on the current schedule, even though that person got a step every year, because those steps are not $6,600 or $660 a year, or whatever it would take to get to 2,000. 2,000 divided by 3 is a weird number, or at least for my small brain it is. So that's the third thing is steps to 30, but banded every 3 years.
Yep.
Then we get to number 4. And number 4 is where people, and this is where I've got the most heartburn. And this is PSTA shared this with legislators, with the governor's office. And the fourth thing is currently there are 5 lanes for teacher compensation in South Carolina: bachelor's plus 18, master's plus 30, doctorate. And which lane you fall in is dependent on your level of educational attainment, your terminal degree, meaning the highest degree you've earned. And then you've got those 2 kind of oddball categories, and I'm going to call them oddball because I'm a master's plus 30 teacher getting paid on a master's plus 30 lane for the class I'm teaching right now. But that's not a degree. That's like additional credits on top of a degree. And so we've got those 5 lanes. What the governor's proposing is collapsing those 5 lanes to 2, a bachelor's lane and a graduate lane. So what that means is if you're on bachelor's or bachelor's plus 18, you fall in the bachelor's lane. If you are currently on master's plus 30, or doctorate, you fall into the graduate lane. That is a collapse of 3 lanes into one. The teacher task force that the governor bases a lot of his proposals on had 3 lanes. It still had a 3rd lane for doctorate, and my belief is, at minimum, that's where we need to be. And the reason I say that is because when you look at the lifetime earnings potential of an individual, which the governor clearly articulates in his budget, the goal is to maximize lifetime earnings for educators. If you look at his salary schedule over the course of a career, somebody on a bachelor's or bachelor's plus 18 comes out tens of thousands of dollars ahead on the governor's schedule over the course of a career compared to where they are right now. Somebody with a master's degree comes out tens of thousands of dollars ahead. Somebody with a master's plus 30 comes out about $20,000 behind. And someone with a doctorate comes out hundreds of thousands of dollars behind because of the elimination of that lane.
Right.
If you added the 3rd lane that the task force had, that would largely be mitigated. The other thing that's important for people to hear that we probably should have led with, like this is the single most important thing, because people look at a salary schedule and rightly, it's human nature, the first thing you do is you think, well, what does that mean for me? And you look at it and you go, holy pay cut. Like, holy pay cut, Batman. Yeah. If I'm in the doctorate lane, the governor has proposed a hold harmless provision that means that if you're a teacher this year, then next year you cannot experience a pay cut, that you will at worst come out net neutral. So what that means is, I just said that a doctorate would potentially over their career lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. What the governor's envisioning is, no, at worst, there is no change for you compared to the current salary schedule. And he would argue that you're probably still going to come out ahead because of career ladder stipends and strategic compensation stipends. Now, to be clear, and we put this in the emails, the hold harmless provision is a 1-year provision. That is not because Governor McMaster only wants to take care of people for a year. It's because his budget document is an annual document. It would be inappropriate for him to propose a 10-year hold harmless provision because the budget doesn't work that way. It is a year-to-year document.
Yeah.
So those lanes are the ones that give people the most heartburn, and that's where we would encourage members to read the Legislative Alert Network email that shows you charts that clearly break down comparison of what is to what would be under the proposal. Then look at your district salary schedule and account for any additional pay your district may be giving, and then get engaged in advocacy.
Yeah, that, Patrick, thank you for laying out the 4 areas. And, I think the 4th lane is the one, or the 4th issue is the one that I've heard the most from teachers when I've spoken to them. And that's where your advocacy comes into play. You being able to communicate with your elected officials how you feel about that. And I know many of you, I spoke to a couple of teachers that are deciding whether they're going to get another degree and how this affects them. And that is real life. That is real life issues that you need to communicate. You should communicate in our land, whether it's through our land that comes out on Friday. We give you the easiest way to do that. But it also is, when you have those personal relationships with your members, you utilize that and you speak up. So thank you, Patrick, for going into the weeds a little bit about the salary schedule, because it is probably the number one issue that we've been hearing from our members. And so we wanted to make sure we took the time on this episode to really go into the weeds and talk about a lot of what's going on.
Yeah, and it's not only a priority for our members, it's a priority for legislators.
Yeah.
Like, this is a complex issue. If they didn't care about recruitment and retention, you just keep doing the same thing you've always done. But they have raised educator pay every year for the last 4 years, 5 years. The overall number of vacancies has gone up every year for the last 5 years. So the definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing you've always been doing. Now, proposing something for the sake of proposing doesn't make it a good thing, but the commitment is there to enhance recruitment and retention. The challenge becomes, how do you do it, and who knows better how to retain teachers than a teacher, because you're the target audience.
You're the target
So
audience.
Share your voice and your experience and your viewpoints, because if the policy proposal isn't going to retain you, then it is not achieving its stated goal, because in the governor's proposal, he clearly lays out he wants to enhance educator recruitment and retention. So share your voice, share your experience, because no one knows better than you what will retain you in this profession for the long haul.
Yeah. And I'm sure over the next few episodes, we'll be providing more updates as this proposal either gains traction or not when it comes to the House and the Senate. And so, Patrick, we thank you for your time today. Always our favorite guest to come on to the episode.
Thank you, Craig. Checks in the mail.
Thanks, Patrick. It's been another impactful episode of the PSTA Podcast. I'm Craig King, your host. I'll see you next time.